My boss got his heart broken. I took a screenshot to gloat about it with my bestie, but I accidentally sent it to him. He slowly typed back a question mark. You're here to laugh at me too? To save my job, I powered through it. No, smoking and drinking are bad for you. It breaks my heart to see you like this. Boss, sorry, I don't get involved with people who are already taken. You should just give up. 10 minutes passed. Anyway, wanna see my abs? Just worked out. It was Valentine's Day. I made a point of posting a photoshopped picture of me and my celebrity crush. Our 3rd year together. Less than half an hour later. The main company group chat exploded over something. Turns out, there was a new rule: no one could take Valentine's Day off. Everyone was calling it absurd. We moved the conversation to our private group chat. Charlie said the boss made up the rule on the spot. Rumor has it the boss is going through a breakup. Can someone like Julian actually get dumped? The thought that even a guy with a face like Julian's can be heartbroken makes me feel a little better about my own love life. No one could focus on work. Everyone was trying to figure out who this mystery woman was. The one who broke the heart of our resident ice prince, Julian. Someone tagged me, Sophie has the boss's number, right? See if he posted anything on his socials. I was vague. I can't see anything. He probably has me blocked. In reality, I was already tapping into Julian's feed. He had posted just one sentence: why does she still love that other guy? I guess I'm just not attractive to her. The location tag was a bar. He was definitely heartbroken. Purely for the sake of sharing gossip. I took a screenshot to send to my bestie so we could spill the tea. Right after I hit send, my supervisor dropped a file on my desk that needed handling. I immediately pretended to be absorbed in my work. After she left, a notification popped up on my phone. A second later, I wasn't smiling anymore. Because I'd sent the screenshot to the man himself. They're all laughing at me. You're here to laugh at me too? His tone was dripping with misery. I panicked. Julian, Sophie, what exactly are you trying to say? I'm screwed. The boss is furious. To save my job, I typed with a stiff upper lip, no, smoking and drinking are bad for you. It breaks my heart to see you like this. Boss, you have to take care of yourself. Without you, who's going to give me my 5-figure monthly salary, my 10 to 5 schedule, triple overtime pay, and this cushy job where I can slack off and get weekends off? The typing bubble appeared on the other end. I waited, my stomach in knots. Julian, I'm sorry, I won't be the other guy. You should just give up. Did the breakup fry his brain? Or did he text the wrong person? Did he think I was his ex-girlfriend? 10 minutes passed. Anyway, wanna see my abs? Just worked out. When I got that message, my phone felt like it was burning up. A coworker walked by. I guiltily shoved my phone into my pocket. When I got home, I realized my phone hadn't been locked. I had accidentally sent Julian about 800 I want you memes. At first, the man was not receptive. Sophie, I'm your boss. Please respect me. I'd like our relationship to remain professional. But after the onslaught of my memes, he seemed to give in with a sigh. Fine, whatever makes you happy. But I don't want a third person to know about this arrangement. It's a matter of my dignity, after all. Half an hour had passed since that last message. The boss was waiting for my reply. I was squatting by the elevator, racking my brain. My next-door neighbor came back from walking his dog. Sophie, just getting off work? I nodded sadly. More overtime today. The overtime pay came with a bonus for emotional damages, but that didn't make me hate it any less. My neighbor chuckled. You work so hard every day, and your salary's great. You must have a nice pile of savings. The golden retriever at his feet was still hyper. It barreled right into people. And I was the unlucky victim. But it didn't end there. The dog snatched my phone as it flew out of my hand, kicking off a frantic chase between 2 humans and 1 dog. An hour later, I finally wrestled my chewed-to-bits phone from the dog's mouth. My neighbor was mortified and immediately sent me a payment. My boy caused you so much trouble. I'll pay for double the cost. Well, all right then. I tearfully accepted. The good news, the phone still worked. The bad news, it was on the fritz. The kind where if I wanted it to go left, it insisted on going right. Julian, having waited a long time, finally poked me. Sophie, have you made up your mind yet? I've thought about it, and this whole thing is ridiculous. It's beneath my station. If people found out, what would they think of me? You tell me. This is my first time. If you're not interested, just say so. To be honest, I'm not that into the idea either. I'm not that kind of person. Just say no if you mean no, but why are you leaving me on read? I can see the typing bubble. Fine, if you're not interested, just don't tell anyone about this. Please. I tried to type no. But this stupid phone, completely out of my control, started mashing the keyboard on its own. Sent, I agree. Oh, crap. I frantically mashed the unsend button. The stupid phone started glitching again. It sent several kissy face emojis in a row. A minute later, Julian coolly replied with a simple okay. My phone was still going rogue. Julian, it's only the first day. Is this really okay? I'm very traditional. I don't want to move this fast. I've never been in a relationship before. What's the first step? Then, in utter despair, I watched as my phone automatically sent him a "wanna get in my bed?" meme. Julian seemed completely stunned. Speechless, he managed to type out, "You're so thirsty, Sophie. For the love of God." I was so mad I threw the phone directly into the full bathroom sink. If I'm going down, you're coming with me. The next day, I snuck into the office. I casually asked a coworker. I heard the morning meeting was cancelled. Coworker, yeah, the boss took a sick day. A wave of relief washed over me. Great, I can play dumb for another day. My phone was at the repair shop. The guy said it would be ready by evening, so I didn't plan on buying a new one. I had no idea what Julian's final reply was. My supervisor came over. Sophie, can you run this file over to the hospital for Julian to sign? It's urgent. I was instantly on edge. I made it to his hospital room door but didn't have the guts to go in. Sophie? It was Charlie, holding a container of porridge. My expression was a bit strained. Then I had an idea. Charlie, I'm just here to get a file signed by the boss. Perfect timing, you can. That's great, I actually have to run. Could you give this porridge to the boss for me? Charlie was in a huge hurry. He kindly knocked on the door for me. Julian, Sophie's here. A cool, detached voice came from inside. Oh. I psyched myself up. Even my footsteps were cautious. The man in the hospital bed turned to look at me. His gaze was chilling. I gave an awkward greeting. Good morning, Julian. Julian's face was a mask of accusation. It's not good at all. I didn't dare move. After a long, long time. The man said plaintively, "Are you planning to starve me to death, girlfriend?" My hand trembled as I passed him the porridge. Julian, I need 10 minutes to explain what happened last night. Julian was genuinely hungry. He focused entirely on eating. He didn't even look up. Let's hear your excuse. 10 minutes later. So that's what happened. I didn't send any of those messages. I sat up straight, cautiously glancing at him. An unreadable smile flickered in his eyes. You don't have a boyfriend? I nodded emphatically. That's an indie singer I've had a crush on for years. He's not very famous, so you're not the only one who got the wrong idea. After I finished, I felt like he was focusing on the wrong thing. I reminded him, "Boss, please don't think I sent you that screenshot to make fun of you. I swear, I'm completely loyal to you." Julian slowly wiped his hands. "So you're saying, you just happened to screenshot it and send it to me, then you were forced to say all that stuff, then a dog just happened to run off with your phone, which just happened to break, and then your broken phone just happened to confess its love to me all by itself?" I nodded with a determined look in my eyes. "Yes, Julian. That's exactly right." The misunderstanding was cleared up. But just as I was about to breathe a sigh of relief, the man sneered, "Sophie, do I look that easy to fool?" I wanted to cry. I just shook my head. He began his one-sided tirade. "Do you have any idea how long I waited outside your apartment last night?" My voice was soft. "Then why didn't you come up and find me?" He shot me a glare. "Is this a role I should be proud of?" True, it was a messy situation. "And don't you know the temperature dropped last night?" It was cold. Julian was clearly fuming. "Do you even have a heart?" I stole a glance at him. And blurted out an internet meme, "So, wanna grab a beer?" Julian kicked me out. He said he needed to be alone. He told me to go stand on the side. After I got my phone back that night, I urgently opened our chat. At first, Julian had sternly rejected my proposition to sleep with him. "Sophie, I expect you to have some self-respect. I'm not that kind of person." That definitely sounded like him. When Julian first arrived, he couldn't find a secretary right away, so I filled in for a bit. I handed him a cup of coffee. The man accidentally brushed my hand. And he blushed while saying, "Excuse me." Out of professional habit, I noticed his cuff wasn't straight and instinctively reached out to fix it. The man quickly pulled his hand back. Without looking up, he said, I'll do it myself." There was even another time, when Julian had a late-night work dinner and his driver had an emergency. I went to pick him up. He was squatting by the side of the road, staring at me in a daze for a long time. The next day, he informed me, "Don't do things like that again. It's not safe." Julian was a perfect gentleman, with a great temper. But that didn't stop him from being a stickler at work. Because of this, many of us lost our romantic illusions about his handsome face. I was no exception. At a company retreat a while back, while Julian was away, we all let loose, and the questions were all about him. Someone asked me, "Sophie, if you ended up on a blind date with the boss, what would you do?" I blurted out, "Run. No matter how great he is, he's still my boss." Who would develop feelings for their boss? Anyway, I would never, ever be interested in my boss, even if he were a god. I was getting more and more carried away, not noticing that the man himself was standing behind me, listening to the whole thing. Before he left, he asked, seemingly unable to let it go, "Am I really that repulsive to you?" I slapped my cheeks lightly. Stop thinking about that cringy moment. I continued scrolling through our chat history. The more I read, the more my smile stiffened. Julian's last message was sent at 1 a.m. He wrote, "Come downstairs. I'll let you kiss me, just once. But sleeping with me is out of the question." And I was fast asleep, leaving him hanging all night. I carefully crafted my message in the chat box before sending it. "Boss, don't worry, no one will ever find out about our situation. So could you please just pretend nothing ever happened?" The boss didn't reply, but he posted a picture on his feed. It was a photo of his hand with an 4 in it. The caption read, "In the end, I had to bear it all alone." I felt a pang of guilt and added another message, "Please take care of yourself. I'll come visit you again soon." The man replied instantly. "When is soon? You know I'm very busy." "Whatever. I happen to have a meeting near your place. I guess I can wait for you for a little bit. Come downstairs." And so, there I was, in my $10, extra plush fleece pajamas, sneaking into a luxury Rolls-Royce parked by the side of the road. The moment I got in, I was struck by Julian's handsome face. A custom-tailored suit, black leather shoes with red soles, he exuded an air of sophistication from head to toe. No wonder. It's like those male leads in novels who say, "You can't even compare to a single strand of her hair." I felt so inadequate. "Why are you staring at me like that?" Julian must still have a cold. He lowered his head and coughed a few times. The cough wasn't a big deal, but it made his face and ears turn bright red. I felt a bit awkward. I answered honestly, with a little exaggeration, "Boss, you look handsome even when you're sick." I almost thought a novel hero had walked into real life. The man's eyes held a hint of shyness as he asked, "Oh? What kind of novels do you read?" My brain was faster than my mouth. Gay romance. Julian. The next day at work, Charlie called in sick. The boss needed someone by his side. They had to pick someone to fill in for a while. My co-workers were all raising their hands. I played deaf and dumb. Then, in the middle of swatting a mosquito, my supervisor's eyes locked onto me. "Sophie, seeing as you're so eager, you're it." Afterward, the supervisor explained, "You've worked with Julian before, so you're familiar with his ways. You're the most suitable choice." My main issue was the recent awkwardness with Julian. My supervisor cut right to the chase. "I hear it comes with a big raise." I grabbed her hand. "You definitely picked the right person." That afternoon, I moved my things to a different office. Having the boss as my direct supervisor felt kind of awesome. While he was out, I started slacking off again. I saw Charlie had updated his feed. It was a photo dump from a beach vacation. A paid vacation with triple the pay feels amazing. I'm voting for Julian for chairman again next term. Confused, I commented, "Charlie, are you feeling better?" The next second, the post was gone. Charlie d'med me, "You saw wrong. That's a picture from my hospital. I'm finding joy in my sorrow, being abstract." I couldn't really doubt him further. All I could do was comfort him, "Take care of yourself. Charlie, Sophie, you have to be good to the boss. He's really been through a lot." Julian was in the hospital for a severe cold. He only stayed for a day. Then he threw himself back into work, illness and all. The man stood by the windy entrance with a coat draped over his shoulders, occasionally coughing into his fist. The back of his hand was still bruised from the fall. He looked frail and pitifully vulnerable. Especially when I saw what my coworkers were saying in our private chat. I heard the boss stood outside his ex-girlfriend's apartment all night trying to get her back, and that's how he got sick. I heard he grew up sickly and was always in and out of the hospital. A small cold could shorten his life by 3 years. I heard his family had his fortune told, and he won't live past 25. So that's what Charlie meant when he said Julian had it rough. I was overcome with guilt and sympathy. My attitude became incredibly attentive. After parking the car, I took out a new scarf and opened an umbrella. I jogged over to him. Julian seemed pleasantly surprised, a small smile playing on his lips. "What are you doing here?" Worried he'd catch another chill, I told him to lower his head. The man was very obedient. When he leaned in, he smelled faintly of antiseptic. "Charlie is sick, so I've been assigned to take over his duties for now. By the way, Julian, what's wrong with Charlie? It seems pretty serious. Otherwise, they wouldn't have had me fill in for a whole month." Julian averted his eyes and stammered, I don't know. Maybe he broke a bone somewhere." I didn't think much of it. Julian's house wasn't far. During the half-hour drive, I tried my best to make conversation. But I was careful to avoid the topic of his love life. "Julian, why did you decide to come to this branch of the company?" This was just one of the Jiang Corporation's subsidiaries. When we heard the heir apparent was coming to manage it, a lot of people were shocked. There was another reason I was shocked. The name Julian was exactly the same as his name. The man was reading a file, but he looked up at my question. "Fate, I guess." I said from the heart, well, it's a great fate. I love this fate. If Julian hadn't come and improved the company benefits tenfold, I would have quit this crappy job long ago. It was a funny coincidence. The day he arrived, I had just been complaining to my bestie in the elevator. I can't stand another second at this crappy company. That manager is always sending me flowers one day and asking me out to dinner the next. He calls me into his office in front of everyone and says he wants to pursue me. Please, it's workplace harassment, not a courtship. I quit my last job because my boss suddenly got it in his head to confess his love to me. Now I'm here dealing with the same crap. It's so annoying. I was deep in my rant when I realized there was someone else in the elevator. Staring would be rude. So I tried to make out his appearance from the reflection on the elevator walls. He was tall, slender, and had fair skin. Those three things alone told me he was handsome. He had his head turned, so I couldn't see his face clearly. My bestie was pressing for more details on the phone. My attention was pulled back. I continued, you always see stuff online about people falling for their teachers in school, their drill sergeants in training, or their bosses at work. Is it so hard for me to find someone I like that I have to fall for a coworker? Anyway, it's never going to happen in this lifetime. As I said that, the man in my peripheral vision seemed to stiffen for a moment, standing a little straighter. I ignored it. The more I talked, the angrier I got. Whatever, I'll just quit. This crappy company doesn't even have any cute guys, the pay is just okay, and it's not like I can't find something better. Then, the next day, a ridiculously handsome guy showed up. The third day, I got a raise. The fourth day, the manager who was harassing me was fired. Before he left, he even bowed and apologized to me. Heck yeah. I was feeling pretty smug. It was as if I'd said exactly what Julian wanted to hear. He ducked his head and smiled faintly. Yeah, I think so too. This fate is a good one. I was so mesmerized I lost my mind. I blurted out, by the way, Julian, about that offer to see your abs, was that for real? He had mentioned it before, but I never replied, and the topic just died. Such a shame. The man's smile vanished instantly. He turned his head away. The ear I could see was so red it looked like it was on fire. Sophie, watch the road. I realized I had just hit on my boss. That was so out of line. I sat up straight and focused on driving. A hesitant voice came from the back seat, I'll show you some other time. Is this really happening? Of course, I didn't have the heart to make him. What if he took his shirt off and caught a cold again? After the man got out of the car, I fussed over him like a mother hen, wrapping his scarf securely. Julian, you have to take care of yourself. Julian hesitated, then hesitated again. Finally, he couldn't hold it in any longer. I'm not as fragile as you think. I only got a cold that day because I took a cold shower and then stood in the wind. I didn't dare say it. Serves you right. Taking a cold shower in the middle of winter. What, were you on fire or something? Is that you, little Sophie? A woman's voice startled me. Julian pulled me aside, looking surprised. Mom, I thought you were traveling. In my own surprise, I slowly said, Mrs. Jensen? The woman beamed and said yes. My courage immediately shriveled. Mrs. Jensen was my elementary school homeroom teacher. I was a mischievous kid back then and brought a hamster to school to show off. Mrs. Jensen confiscated it. Oh, the tears. I cried in her office on my knees, lying down, rolling on the floor. I cried until Mrs. Jensen gave in. If you pass your final math exam, I'll give him back to you. So I studied hard. And I just barely passed. But after a month apart, my hamster had turned into a fat little pig. He was so chubby his eyes were just slits. He looked a little greasy. I refused to believe it was the same hamster. Mrs. Jensen scratched her head, explaining, sorry about that. My son was taking care of him. I didn't expect this to happen. Then, she pulled a little boy out from behind her. "Julian, hurry up and apologize to the nice girl." I looked up, my eyes still puffy with tears. And I was captivated by the fair-skinned, beautiful little boy in front of me. He was a bit shy. He stood on his tiptoes and patted my head. "I'm sorry. I'll make sure he loses weight. Don't cry, okay?" I turned into a monster from a fairy tale seeing a tasty little morsel. I shamelessly said. "Pinky promise. If you can't do it, you'll have to give me yourself as compensation." His eyes widened slightly. "Huh? And then?" That was it. My family had to move, and I transferred schools. Mrs. Jensen quit her job and took Julian abroad. We never contacted each other again. At first, I just thought it was a coincidence that these two people had the same name. I never imagined I'd actually run into them like this. After Mrs. Jensen and I caught up, she shot him a glare. "It's all because I saw your social media post. I had to rush back to see my future." "Mom." Julian's tone suddenly turned serious. "Don't say the wrong thing." Mrs. Jensen paused for a few seconds, then seemed to understand. She took my hand. "Sophie, you have to come visit me more often when you have time. I'm so bored." Julian coolly pulled my hand from her grasp. "She's my secretary." The mother and son started bickering. She grabbed my hand again. Yours, what's yours?" "She's not your girlfriend, but you're already trying to keep me away." "I was Sophie's teacher, which makes me way more important than you." I was completely lost. Julian's face started to turn red. He gritted his teeth. "Don't talk nonsense. There's nothing between us. It's just a professional relationship." Mrs. Jensen snorted. "Sophie might not have feelings for you, but you sure do. When we moved abroad, you cried your eyes out over her. You insisted on coming back every year to look for her." The man pressed his lips together, wanting to speak but holding back. With a beet red face, he just told me to get home early. Then he turned and walked toward his house without another word. Mrs. Jensen paid him no mind, leaning in to tell me, "When this kid couldn't find you back then, he cried so much he ended up in the hospital." Later, I had to pull a lot of strings and ask the school for help just to find out where you were. He came back every single year trying to find you, but you know how shy Julian is. The year you graduated high school, he finally worked up the courage to go to your school with a bouquet of flowers, but then he saw you holding hands with some guy. He came back with tears just streaming down his face. After that, he never mentioned your name again. Wow, so that actually happened. No wonder I used to get a Happy New Year text every year. I always thought it was from a friend of the phone's previous owner. So I never gave it much thought. When I got home, I poked the man on WhatsApp. "Boss, did you recognize me from the very beginning?" "Julian, yeah." "Then why didn't you say anything?" "Forget girls changing as they grow up, guys do too." I honestly didn't recognize him. Julian said, "I was afraid you wouldn't remember me. And I was afraid saying something would make you feel pressured." The high school group chat, which had been silent for ages, suddenly lit up with plans for a reunion. The class president specifically tagged me, "Sophie, you skipped last year. You can't bail on us this time." I sent a screenshot to my bestie to complain. I made sure I was sending it to the right person this time. It's just a chance for everyone to see if you've bought a car or a house. If you have, they get jealous. If you haven't, they get to show off. What's the point? My bestie agreed, especially that class president. He was such a tattletale. I cut my hair short back then to save time, and he told everyone I didn't look like a girl and was weird. He's nuts. I remembered it all too clearly. The school was really strict about catching couples back then. You'd get a $100 reward for reporting someone. My bestie and I ended up on the public shame list 5 times in 1 week. That class president was responsible for half of them. Right up until quitting time. The class chat was still buzzing. More and more people were tagging me. I heard you're working at Jiang Corp. That's the best company around here. Don't forget about us old classmates now that you're successful. Give her a break. It would be so awkward for Sophie to see the class president and his crew. Oh, so that's why Sophie refused to come last time. That makes sense. The class president, Chad, tried to act magnanimous. All right, let's not poke at Sophie's old wounds. I wouldn't know how to comfort her. I forgot to mention. The reason Chad was always targeting me back then was because he thought I had a crush on him and was playing hard to get by not confessing. God knows I explained it a million times. I was looking in his direction because the blackboard was there. I'm nearsighted. Now I hear this overconfident jerk is getting married. To some rich girl. No wonder he was so insistent on me coming to the reunion. My bestie tagged me in the chat. You haven't told them? That piqued everyone's curiosity. I played along. I was worried no one would believe me. Chad pressed for details. Me, well, a couple of years ago, I got lucky and won tens of millions in the lottery. I just bought a few houses, opened a few companies. They're doing pretty well. I just got back from a business trip abroad. When you have money, you start to prioritize your health, you know? So, about this reunion. The subtext was, you people aren't worth my time. Chad was triggered. You're lying. There's no way you're rich. I sent a shrugging emoji. See? I told you you wouldn't believe me. Then, my bestie and I both dropped a passive-aggressive meme and left the group chat. We didn't expect them to believe it. The goal was to plant a seed of doubt, 1 part believable, 9 parts unbelievable, and leave them with no one to confirm it with. I had to work on Saturday. Driving Julian to a business dinner. I was his designated driver. In the car, the man was still coughing. I expressed my concern tactfully. Julian, you should probably drink less. It's not good for you. I was genuinely afraid he'd go in upright and come out horizontal. How would I explain that to his family? The man's lips quirked slightly. Are you telling me what to do? He was probably reminding me I'd overstepped. I immediately shook my head. No. I didn't say anything. Julian wouldn't let it go. Repeat what you just said. I didn't dare. I was so wrong, boss. I stubbornly insisted, I didn't say anything just now. Julian's voice started to change. Yes, you did. You just said it. I changed the subject. We're here, boss. Please just go. The man slammed the car door shut. He walked around to my driver's side window and knocked. My heart pounded as I lowered it a crack. He said viciously, I'm going to drink. I'm going to drink myself to death. With that, he turned and stormed off haughtily. What could I say to that? Good for you. You go, girl. A host at the door led the way. When Julian entered the private room, everyone inside stood up. Julian. Please, everyone, have a seat. He chose a spot by the window. From there, he could see his car down below. In the driver's seat, a woman was gently banging her head against the steering wheel, muttering something under her breath. Julian's eyes lifted slightly at the corners. He looked away. Let's begin. The dinner had been organized by the other party. The venue was respectable but unremarkable. Julian raised a hand, refusing the glass of liquor being offered to him. Sorry, I don't drink. The other person was slightly taken aback. Is something not to your satisfaction, Julian? He smiled faintly. No, I've quit drinking. No one else tried to persuade him. The meeting went faster than usual. Mainly because the man at the head of the table seemed distracted, frequently glancing out the window. He set down his teacup. In that case, I'll be taking my leave. Julian had never liked handling business outside the office. Nothing was more efficient than resolving matters in a conference room. He was the last to arrive and the first to leave. No one dared to object. As he left, the man's steps were a bit rushed. A murmur of admiration filled the room. For Julian to take time out of his busy schedule to be here, he's really shown us a great deal of respect. I was getting stuffy in the car. So I got out for some fresh air. Unexpectedly, I ran into someone I knew. Sophie? Chad was walking over with his girlfriend. He was the class president I'd called an idiot. I thought you said you weren't coming. I understood. So they had booked a table here too. I had no intention of making small talk. I'm here for work, I said coolly. Driving my boss around is work, isn't it? Chad's attention shifted to the car behind me. A brand new Aston Martin. One of the many in Julian's garage. He drove a different one each week. The man's eyes were full of doubt. Was what you said today true? I nodded without batting an eye. Of course it was. This is just one of my cheapest cars. I just gave it to my kept lover the other day. Chad and his girlfriend exchanged a look. Both of them found it unbelievable. He laughed. Somehow, I get the feeling you're lying. You're a woman. How could you possibly afford a car like this? He was right about that. I certainly couldn't afford it. But I could sure pretend. Just as I was about to retort, I saw Julian coming out. Oh, crap. Why is he done so fast? What do I do? What do I do? I was starting to lose my cool. The man looked composed, carrying his jacket, his shirt sleeves rolled up. Sophie, shall I drive you home? I was stunned. What did he just call me? Chad turned around with his girlfriend, one of them sneering, the other with stars in her eyes. So that's your lover? Just a pretty boy. You women are all the same, so basic. I got angry. He's not. That's right, I'm her lover, Julian interrupted me. He even came over and took my hand, his expression innocent. Honey, I'm sorry to have kept you waiting. Wow, Julian's hand was so warm. I couldn't help but squeeze it a little harder. My hand was gripped even tighter in return. He was so good at this. I'm going to vote for him for chairman next term, just like Charlie. Chad sneered. Living off a woman, using her money. What are you ever going to amount to? Kid, you've only got a few good years left. I glared at him. Give you a few more years and you still wouldn't be as tall as him. You have the nerve to talk. Julian said thoughtfully, it's fine. Being liked by her is an honor. By the way, sir, I just turned 18. Good luck to you. Chad's face turned black with rage. His girlfriend snorted, shook off his hand, and walked away. Julian opened the back door for me. Thank you, boss, I whispered as I got close. The man smirked. Get in. I elegantly slid into the car. Julian got into the driver's seat. He floored the gas. It had just rained, and there was a puddle under the wheels. The muddy water splashed all over Chad. He looked both pathetic and ridiculous. Julian tossed out a few $100 bills. My bad. Then, he sped off. Julian dropped me off downstairs. I thanked him several more times. You're welcome. However, I need an explanation. The man tilted his head slightly. What's this about a lover? I knew it. There was no escaping this one. I hung my head and quietly explained the whole situation. For a long time, there was no sound in the car. I looked up. The man seemed to have been stunned for a while. He hastily looked away, his voice a little unnatural. Oh. You could have told me sooner next time. I'm your boss. What's all this about lovers? It's so undignified. I don't want to be your... His voice trailed off. But I understood. I apologized profusely. I promise, it won't happen again. I'm sorry for the trouble. Next time, I'll just say I have a rich husband I've been secretly married to for years. He's never home, but he gives me a 7-figure allowance every month. I couldn't help but say what I was really thinking. That's truly the dream. But to my surprise, Julian suddenly sneered. Pathetic. A mere few million? So stingy. Anyway, if I ever get married, all my money goes to my wife. I wouldn't keep a single cent for myself. And a secret marriage is out of the question. That's something only weak men do. I would never. What was this sudden competitiveness about? I didn't get it. I asked the question that had been buried in my heart. Julian, do you like me? A conflicted look flashed across Julian's face, as if he'd been struggling for a long time. He shook his head forcefully and said through gritted teeth, no. Don't get the wrong idea. Seriously, don't overthink it. I really don't like you. I just see you as a friend, at most. Don't get any ideas, and don't quit. I said I understood. I just see you as a friend, too. A rich and handsome friend, which is great for my social standing. Even though my heart was fluttering a little, he'd made himself clear. A person has to have some self-awareness. I couldn't just throw myself at him. I shouldn't have said anything. The moment I did, the man's face fell. He looked upset again. In the middle of the night, Julian's feed was updated again. My heart is broken, my tears are flowing, I am a sad rose in the midnight rain. I thought he still wasn't over his ex-girlfriend. I wanted to tell him to move on. But then again, I was afraid of making things worse for him. I rolled over and scrolled past it, pretending I hadn't seen it. Half an hour later, he posted again. I miss you, but we have nothing to say to each other. But if you reply to this, I'll have something to say. I ignored it again. Another half an hour passed. Julian kept it simple, 3 mirror selfies of his abs. Holy crap. I immediately sat up and zoomed in on each picture. So pale, so pink, so defined. And in those gray sweatpants, wow. I gave it a like. As a show of support for my boss, hoping he would continue this great work. The man replied instantly, so you only make a sound when I posted pics? You animal. Julian went on a business trip. His return date was uncertain. My job became so liberating. I wished it could be like this forever. My mom called for the 3rd time. If you go on a blind date, the family will give you an extra $1 million. Yes, I actually have another secret identity. Daughter of a millionaire. My earlier lie about winning the lottery was actually true. Except the main character was my dad. Over the years, he'd used his smarts to make a lot of money. To prevent me from getting a bad attitude about our sudden wealth, my mom decreed that I had to be self-sufficient after college. That's what she said, but if I called her crying about being broke, she'd reluctantly transfer me money. $1 million. I did the math. That's another down payment on a house. I agreed. I requested time off from my boss. Julian was probably in a meeting at this hour, so I didn't expect a reply right away. Just as I thought that, a message came through. Why do you need time off? How many days? My mom said there were 3 potential dates, so 1 a day. I said, 3 days, probably. Otherwise it won't be enough. Julian, okay. I was about to put my phone down. He sent another message, as a friend, may I ask what you need 3 days off for? Me, blind dates. I casually made a joke, if one of them works out, I'll have you be the witness at my wedding. Julian was so generous, his wedding gift would definitely be substantial. I was actually starting to look forward to it. Before I could even smile. Julian, 1 day is enough. No, half a day. Don't get the wrong idea. The company is just very busy. I silently looked up at the snacks and milk tea piled on my desk. Busy? Half a day it was. I chose the afternoon. We met at a coffee shop not far from the office. One that my family owns. The guy's last name was Cheen. He'd studied abroad and came from an old money, academic family. Honestly, I felt like I wasn't good enough for him. He had excellent manners, and there was nothing to fault in his looks, family background, or etiquette. I thought about it. If we were to actually get together, it would probably be very difficult to find common ground. Patrick Cheen was very busy. He had taken time out of his day to be here. Are you satisfied with me, Sophie? I don't have any strong feelings about marriage. This is mainly to appease my elders. I'm rarely home more than a few times a year. I may be lacking on the emotional front, but not on the material side. I can provide a monthly allowance of no less than 7 figures. My dream was coming true. Even though I always fantasized about this, now that it was real, I didn't dare to nod. As I was contemplating this over my coffee, a familiar voice came from behind me. Sophie. I turned in surprise. How did Julian get back so fast? He seemed to have run all the way here. His jacket was slung over his arm, his tie was loosened, and he was slightly out of breath. Good-looking people are just different. Just by standing there, leaning against the wall to catch his breath, he captured the attention of everyone in the shop. Sophie, who is this? Patrick raised an eyebrow, asking. Watching Julian walk over, I replied, he's my boss. The man smiled slightly. Perhaps more than that. Since you have something to attend to, I'll take my leave. We can talk again later. This was a roundabout way of saying the blind date was a bust. I said goodbye. As the two men passed each other, they sized each other up, then looked away as if nothing had happened. Julian, what are you doing here? Didn't you say you'd be gone for at least a week? Julian crouched down to be at eye level with me. His gaze was serious. I was afraid if I came back any later, you'd fall for someone else. What? Does he mean what I think he means? Sophie, I like you. I like you a lot. Please don't like anyone else, okay? I wondered if I was hearing things. Didn't you just say a little while ago that you don't like me? He was so adamant about it. A guilty look flashed across Julian's face, mixed with a hint of grievance. Because you said you hated dating coworkers, that if a boss confessed to you, you'd quit, and that you would rather die than fall in love with someone from the same company. Oh, so he was talking about that time in the elevator. Now it was my turn to feel guilty. I rubbed my nose. Well, sometimes accidents happen. I couldn't help it. Julian was just too charming. I'm only human, how could I resist that temptation? If you like me, why didn't you ever pursue me? Julian's eyes fell. I was afraid you'd accuse me of harassment. I was still thinking about Julian's confession. There was no rush. He was right here under my nose, after all. In the meantime, I was a diligent and responsible employee. Boss Julian, on the other hand, was getting a little antsy. He posted a pics every day, visible only to me. There was even one time my phone died, and I borrowed his to look something up. His search history was all. How to seduce a woman. How to get a woman's attention. Don't want to be her boss, can I be her husband instead? That day, when I drove him home, he insisted on getting into the passenger seat. We need to talk. I said, okay. My eyes zeroed in on a certain part of a certain person. He must have been working out again. His shirt was stretched tight, revealing the outlines of his muscles. Julian crossed his arms. I'm getting really angry. Can you please stop stringing me along? If you don't like me, just say so. I'm not the type to cling. I thought for a moment. With a serious and cautious expression, I said, okay, I don't like you. Julian froze for a few seconds. He wouldn't give up. I don't believe you. You answered without even hesitating. You're lying to me. I'll give you one more chance to think it over. I held back a laugh. Julian. Yes. I grabbed his tie and gave it a gentle tug. The man leaned in obediently. Be my boyfriend. A smile spread across the man's lips as he looked down at mine. Okay. A moment later, the car windows were fogged up. In a moment of lost control, I bit Julian's lip. He yelped in pain. Have mercy, baby. I was genuinely afraid he'd break right here, so I didn't push it. You better live a long and healthy life. If I become a widow, I can't guarantee I won't keep a few lovers on the side. The man who had been soft and pliant a second ago was suddenly full of vigor. I'm more than capable. Who said I wasn't? I brought up the rumor in the company chat about him not living past 25. Julian frowned and turned his face away, whispering, I told them to just say I had a weak constitution. How did the rumor get so out of hand? I didn't hear him clearly. What? The man immediately shook his head. Nothing. Let's continue. Julian's epilogue. On his first day back in the country, Julian returned alone. He kept a low profile. He didn't notify anyone. His father had assigned him to manage this branch of the Jiang Corporation. He was planning to grab a coffee to wake himself up. He passed a KFC. A casual glance through the glass door. He froze. Sophie. The person whose name he had written over and over again in his diary so many years ago. Except, it looked like Sophie was recording a video. One moment she was making a crooked face, the next she was baring her teeth, as if she were. Julian wasn't the only one who had stopped to watch. A passerby chuckled and pulled out his phone to record. I was afraid to laugh at first. I thought she might have a disability. This girl is hilarious. A hand blocked his lens. Julian said politely, excuse me, she's a friend of mine. Please don't film her. The passerby walked away with an apologetic look. That day, Sophie spent the whole day being a weirdo. Julian found a corner to sit in and watched her all day. He thought, this city is wonderful. Because the person he dreamed of day and night was here.